Dismissed! Do you want to stay up to date with your favorite radio station in Des Moines? Follow us on Instagram, KWDM 88.7 FM, and on YouTube at tigercage.88.7.
Welcome back to a special segment on 88.7 KWDM The Point, the show where we bring some of the coolest guests and make them the point. My name is Ean Nelson, and I'm with Bryan Williams and Ozzy Cruz Rodriguez. And today we are super, super glad to be joined by Barry Johnson, the lead singer of Joyce Manor, and is with. So yeah, thank you so much, Barry. We are so happy to have you on the show. And yeah, we're going to get right into these questions.
Hey, thanks for having me.
One of the things, just to get started off, one thing we like to ask all of our touring artists as we get on here, when you guys sort of like kicked off your tour, what sort of things do you like to do as a band to make the most out of each stop?
You're touring. So we typically have toured in a van like over the years. So that basically, you don't really have that much time to stop and do much. You're mostly hanging out at gas stations and like just kind of, stuff off of the highway. But on this tour, we've been pretty lucky to have, we're touring on a bus. So we drive overnight to each city. So we just kind of arrive. Like, for example, I just arrived here in Austin. And I kind of wake up around noon, figure out some coffee and then some lunch, and then it's kind of time for sound check. And then your day's sort of planned like that. The main thing I try to get in is like maybe try to go to the gym or something like that. Just try to do one healthy thing every day.
Speaking of touring, you guys are hitting up Des Moines, Iowa on Thursday, April 30th, 2026. On this tour for your album, your new record, I Used to Go to This Bar. In your own words, how do you describe this record?
I'd describe it as kind of a refinement of what we've been doing for almost the last 20 years. I think that it has some kind of elements of like folk punk that was present on our earliest material. I kind of feel like I hear a little more of that than has really been around on the last couple of records, so it's kind of interesting to feel it kind of come full circle.
Yeah, so one of the things you talked about is in the last 20 years or so of all the changes, we've seen, listening to your music, that your sound as a whole group has changed a lot over the past 15 years. And your self-titled album, what has it taken for you guys to see that growth and evolution in your sound as a whole?
I think, there's definitely been some albums that have felt different than others, but I feel like when I get some space away from it, none of it sounds that different. But the way it was received at the time, people were like, oh my God, Joyce Manor really changed it up. But it's interesting now to me to listen back to our discography as a whole, and maybe there's some things sonically that sound different because it was recorded at a different studio or with a different producer or even with different drummers. But some of the songs on this record, from a songwriting standpoint, are really quite similar to what we were doing, in the very, very beginning, even before the first record. So I don't think we've been a band that has made any super hard left turns, even though maybe it seems like people feel that we have.
What would you say to people that have been rather vocal about not just you guys, but bands in general who change their sounds and evolve over time?
I think that there's a way to grow as an artist, and it kind of just depends what your motivations are. So if your motivation is to change your sound because there's some A&R person at your label that is telling you you'll be rich and famous if you just sound more like Turnstile, and that's what's motivating you, changing changing what you're doing, then that's, it's kind of nefarious. But if you are just trying to stay inspired and listen to different kinds of music and let those influences kind of seep into your songwriting organically, then I think that's pure, and you're just trying to stay inspired and stay making honest and genuine music, So there's good reasons to change, and then there's like kind of nefarious reasons to change,
One of the things you mentioned a little bit earlier was like the different drummers. So for you being the founder and lead singer, what has it been like to have a different drummer for each album cycle since 2015? Is it pretty smooth sailing with the transitions, or does it sometimes throw things off?
We've had different drummers the whole time. Like this guy Chris Torres was the first guy, and then we had Mike Smith. So Kurt, the guy who played on the first 3 records, was our 3rd drummer already. So and even we had our friend Elliot from Touche Amore play a few shows when Kurt wasn't available. So we're used to having different people on the drum kit, every few years. And but I think we're getting really good with our current touring drummer Jared, and I think the chemistry we're starting to develop with him is a little bit next level. So I think if there's ever a time in our band where it would really, really hurt to lose a drummer, I think right now is kind of one where I'm pretty invested in our current chemistry. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, it's just par for the course for us, man. We've just always had somebody different back there playing drums, and we have 3 drummers on this record, So
Yeah, talking about being able to like kind of be open to that change. Looking at your band as a whole, what does it mean to you as a group to be able to change and adapt so well to all the different types of life as a whole, being in a band that is as well known as you are, from the different drummers, from the way different producers act, different labels will like kind of interact with you? What does that mean to like be able to adapt so well?
We've known each other since like high school. Like Matt and I have known each other since middle school. So like we're almost at this point brothers, the 3 of us. So it's really hard for anyone to truly join the fold. Like we have whether that's a producer or a drummer, like they're always going to be a little bit outside of this trio that we have, because we've like literally known each other since we were little kids. So I think the chemistry we have and the bond that we have is amazing and really cool, but it's really hard to kind of fit someone else into that just because they don't have the history. So, I mean, I think even being able to have a band for over 20 years, like, cause I mean, Matt and I played in bands before Joyce Manor. So to have a consistent group of 3 men that have strong personalities, but we've kept it together all this time. Like, I think that's kind of a rare thing on its own, even though like we have had a million drummers. We're kind of like not sweating that as long as the 3 of us can keep it together.
And kind of to build off of that, this might sound cliche, but what does it mean to be in the conversation of this generation's leading voices in the melodic punk style of music, or as what some may refer to as the 4th wave of emo, alongside bands like Title Fight, alongside bands like Neck Deep? Like, what does it mean to you to be widely celebrated as part of such an influential time in that culture and the impact it had on people?
Well, I think it gets interesting when, I'm a huge music fan, and I grew up like, really looking up to certain bands and certain like pop punk or emo bands like meant a ton to me. And I basically wanted to be them, that was kind of there were bands that I looked up to, like maybe like the Lawrence Arms or Alkaline Trio or Jawbreaker or Weezer or something like that, right? And so I ended up, getting in the garage with my friends and starting a band that sounded like those bands. And it's interesting when you get to a point where you see a band and you're like, oh my God, this sounds like Joyce Manor. Like, I can tell that this band is influenced directly by Joyce Manor. And I guess I find it really moving because first and foremost, I'm just a huge music fan. So to know that your band is actually like, you know, you can hear that this has like inspired people to keep this genre of music going and breathe fresh life into it. Like, especially if it's a band that I think is good, you know. And I can hear a little bit of Joyce Manor in them. I don't really think there's a higher compliment.
Obviously, throughout the interview, you mentioned your name, Joyce Manor. What is the meaning behind your band name?
So I used to take the bus to work every day, and I was just waiting for the bus, and Matt, the bass player, and myself had a band before Joyce Manor called Fever Kids, and we had played a show with our friends band Andrew Jackson Jihad, and they were starting to get popular, and they were coming down to play in LA, and Sean called me while I was waiting for the bus, and he's like, "Hey, dude, does Fever Kids want to play a show at this place, the Echo Curio?" And I told him that Fever Kids broke up, but I have a new band. And I didn't actually have a new band, I was lying. So he's like, "Oh, cool, like, what's it called? I'll put it on the flyer." And I just said Joyce Manor because I was near the Joyce Manor apartment building in Long Beach. It was kind of near my bus stop, so I just sort of like looked around and just said the first thing I saw. And it's really crazy that you know, if I had been next to something else, you know, if I was next to like Carl's Jr., I'd be like, "Oh, we're called Carl's Jr." or something like that. So, yeah, the fact that I'm forever thinking about and talking about this apartment building called Joyce Manor is kind of a trip.
Okay, next question here. As a massive Bad Religion fan myself, I have to ask you, what was it like working with Brett Gurwitz to produce I Used to Go to This Bar? And is there anything that you guys have learned from him with someone with as much experience in the industry as he has?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm also a really big Bad Religion fan. And it was such a cool experience working with Brett on this record. But it was not our first time working with Brett. He's the owner of Epitaph Records as well. This is the label that we're signed to. So he's been our label CEO since Never Hung Over Again, and he's worked really hands-on on every record. Like he sequenced Never Hung Over Again. He's the person who suggested for the mix, this guy Tony Hoffer mixed album. That was Brett's suggestion. And then for every record, he's listening to demos, he's giving input. But this was the first time that he was the producer, and it just seemed like such a no-brainer. And as soon as we got in the studio with him, it was just really, really apparent that it was a great fit and really good chemistry. And yeah, it's interesting because I'm a massive Bad Religion fan, but I don't really get in any way starstruck around Brett. He's such a humble, funny, goofy, silly guy that you don't feel any kind of whoa, this is the guy that produced Rancid, or this is the guy that wrote all these great Bad Religion songs. He's just such a ordinary, fun, but engaging person that kind of puts you at ease. So there was only a couple moments where I was watching him arrange a background vocal, where I was like, this guy's a genius. And this is insane that he's working on our record. And I find it a really huge honor to be. He hasn't produced a ton of bands in the last 20 years or whatever, but he has a great production style. It's super punk, really just moves fast, doesn't overthink things, and gets great results. And yeah, it was really amazing working with him.
That's great. And talking about, production and whatnot, I was sitting down myself yesterday listening through the entire Joyce Manor discography once again to further prepare myself for today. And I noticed that most of your albums are either just slightly above or under the 20-minute mark. So I've got to ask, do you guys take pride in making shorter, arguably easier to digest albums, or is that just a coincidence in the production side of things?
I think it's the style of music we grew up listening to and writing, The Descendants and Operation Ivy. Those songs are about minute 45, so those were sort of the first songs I learned how to play on guitar. And when I was writing songs, that was kind of what I was modeling it after, is this kind of really memorable, catchy, short stuff, you know. And actually, that band, Andrew Jackson Jihad, had a song called Black Dog that's like a minute long, and I would just play it over and over again. I loved it. I thought it was so beautiful. And I think part of what was so devastating about it was that it was so short. And yeah, I've just always kind of liked short songs. And I guess when I started writing my own songs, they ended up coming out short. And then when it was time to, you know, decide which ones to put on the album, I just wanted to put the very best ones, because that's sort of something I took from Weezer. I really liked that those first few albums only have 10 songs. And, you know, for me, like, Blue Album is just like absolutely perfect the whole way through. And like, even like Enema of the State by Blink-182 has 12 songs, but there's 2 songs you could probably take off and it would be better. So I was sort of like wanted to just make this like 10 song thing that, you know, I thought was perfect, or as close to perfect as I could make it. And yeah, that ends up being like, when your songs are around like 2 minutes or under 2 minutes, or some are slightly over 2 minutes, it ends up averaging about to be a little under 20 minutes. Most of our records kind of hit around the 18-minute mark.
You mentioned a lot about just kind of, you mentioned Blink-182, Weezer. On Monday, we had a chance to sit down with Wheatus, and I think one of the things that I'm taking from both of these interviews is just the knowledge that you have in the whole side of industry. When we talked with him, he was just listing off band after band, artist after artist, and in the first like 5 minutes of the interview, you're doing the same. So my question is, what has your knowledge of just music as a whole? You mentioned that you are a big music nerd. How has that really helped your side of being in this band? How has it helped you become a better band member and musician as a whole?
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of don't understand how you would go into this business on like the side of it that I'm in with not being a music fan. And like, you do come across it. Like sometimes we meet bands or whatever that just don't know anything about music. And they are in the trade of making music. And sort of like being a chef that doesn't like food or something. It's just sort of doesn't make any sense to me that if you don't have like a passion for, or being a filmmaker that doesn't like movies or something like that, which is fine, you know, and maybe you're this like totally auteur that can make this amazing original cinema without ever having watched a movie. But I think if you're gonna dedicate your life to making something, like, you should probably have some knowledge about it. And so, but it just comes really natural to me. I've always been really interested and curious about music. Like, I didn't start really playing guitar until I was 17 years old. But before that, I was just like a massive music fan and just wanted to know about every band in this type of music that I liked, or, you know, or learning about different types of music. You know, I've been interested in a lot of different kinds of music since I was a teenager. So, and that's just a natural curiosity that I have, I guess. And yeah, I guess I was nerdy about it. Like, I wanted to know, like, who produced this record, who mixed it, what label are they on, you know, like, and for whatever reason, my brain can just like store that knowledge and retain it. Like, I still know all that stuff, but just have one of those brains, I guess. I know some people are like that with like sports stats. I've seen people like when I'm working at a restaurant that are just like rattling off like, you know, about sports stuff, and I can just do that with music, you know, whether it's talking about the Beatles, talking about Slayer, talking about, you know, rap or whatever. Like, I just love music and know about music too.
You talked about growing up just loving music, keeping on with that. Through your years being in this business, have any artists or bands that you grew up listening to, or even now that you hear and listen, have you been able to like interact with them through your years of touring and finding, acting at different, playing at different venues? Have you stumbled upon or even interacted with different bands and artists that you like appreciate as musicians?
Yeah, I met a bunch of my heroes, man. Like, I met Rivers Cuomo from Weezer a few times. Like, you know, we toured with them and hung out with him a few times. He was great. Met the Jawbreaker guys. Like, Jawbreaker, a massive influence. They were really cool to tour with, and it was a trip to meet them. Hung out with Mark Hoppus from Blink-182. He was probably the biggest influence that we had the best time hanging out with. Like, it was sort of like they say don't meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed or whatever. He was definitely a case of a guy that was just so sweet, such a good hang, just felt really natural and relaxed, and like genuinely felt like someone I could be friends with. And so that was probably my favorite star-studded encounter. Trying to think who else. We met John Mulaney. That was really cool. He's an amazing comedian. So, through trying to dedicate your life to like writing songs and being in a band, a good band, and for it to bring you next to other creative, successful people, and to get to have like these cool interactions with them, it's pretty neat. I feel like I live a very charmed life in the fact that, I've got to talk to people that are, that talented in whatever field, so, yeah, that's kind of, I haven't had too many nightmare experiences with like people. I've had a couple of people you look up to, and then you get to spend a certain amount of time with them, and they end up kind of being less cool than you hoped. I don't want to name any names, but yeah, I've had just one that I can really think of that was kind of a disaster.
On key with meeting different people through your years, the other aspect of being an artist and touring is the places you've seen. Are there any like venues or just cities, states, countries that you have been with Joyce Manor that have really stuck with you? I know you're a California kid. It's where you grew up. It's where the band was founded. It's where you guys currently reside and where all of your record labels have been. But are there any places outside of that have really stuck with you and have been your favorite places to go or even keep coming back to?
Yeah, I mean, there's the obvious ones. Like, I love New York. Like, New York is insanely fun and a great place, and getting to spend a lot of time there over the course of being in Joyce Manor has been really cool. But I guess some more kind of like deep cuts where, like Madison, Wisconsin is really beautiful, and I've had like a really nice time on some off days there. What else? Graceland, where like Elvis's house. Like we went there in Memphis, and then man, I don't know what's like another deep or somewhere interesting that Joyce Manor has taken us. We got to go to Brazil, which was dope, and like the crowds in Brazil are kind of, people had told me that like, yeah, the fans in Brazil are really really enthusiastic. Like it's very cool, and so I kind of prepped myself for that, but then it was kind of next level. Like I did not expect it to be that, the fans to be that intense over there, and it was really, really cool.
Yeah, talking about just looking back through the history, I know that you guys like founded your band in 2008, and not to make you feel old, but that was the year I was born.
Sick.
Yeah. So through these 17 years, almost coming on 20 years of being in the music industry full on, what are some of the biggest...
That's not true. I was not in the music industry full on in 2008. Like, in 2008, we were, like, basically some kids that were playing shows, like, in a living room. Like, I'd never, met anyone in the music industry at that time. There was a couple, like, we had some... Because we were just, like, local bands, like, little kids just having fun. But a few of our, like, bands that we played with were starting to do a little bit well. Like I mentioned, Andrew Jackson Jihad, or... Our friend Sam was playing in this hardcore band called Trash Talk that were like starting to get a little bit of fan base. So, but I would hardly say that like we were in the music industry until, we've been kind of trying to avoid the music industry this whole time. But we signed to Epitaph Records in 2014, and that was as like music industry as we got. And Epitaph is still like an indie label, and like they come from punk, and they're not like, suits or anything. But yeah, like I guess like I've been doing music full time, I guess, since 2014. But in 2008, I was literally just like a kid, drinking beer and smoking cigarettes and goofing off, you know.
You mentioned, I guess, being in 2014 and how you and your other members really try to stay away from the music industry. Can you talk a little about that skepticism and why you wanted to stay away from it, and kind of what pushed you towards finally signing a record deal with Epitaph?
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to think of the time. You know, you were just being born, so like in the 90s, late 90s, when we were like kind of in high school or in, you know, whatever, that's sort of like when, or in middle school, you know, we were in high school like 2000, 2001, 2003. So people were still buying CDs, but it was sort of starting to slow down because like people were downloading stuff off Napster. And then in 2008, like people were downloading full albums off of like media blogs. So we kind of came up in like the blog era. There wasn't like Spotify yet. There was no streaming. So people would just like, there was basically the music industry was collapsing in front of our eyes. So to sign to like a big label, which, you know, there was maybe around 2011 when we put out our first record, there was a little bit of interest from labels wanting to meet with us, but it just seemed like such a stupid idea at that time. It was like jumping on a sinking ship, you know. It was like why would we do that, you know? So it's sort of like once the streaming model came out, like around 2012 with Spotify, that took a while to be kind of like gain legitimacy. But now that that's sort of like how people make money in music, the major labels and labels kind of have a bit more of an infrastructure to, you know, offer you something. But the time when we were starting out, it didn't make any sense to sign to a major label. Like, I don't know, I think it was just kind of common sense.
Yeah, you mentioned from like the 90s to the early to late 2000s about the huge change from CDs and big discs to now streaming. Have there been any other big industry changes since when you guys really started to get into it in 2014 to now in 2026? What have been those big industry changes, and have they really affected you guys as a group too much?
It hasn't affected us too much, you know. Like I said, like we signed to Epitaph because they're punk, and we talked to them, and they're like artist friendly. You know what I mean? Like they really understand like our band and where we're coming from, and you know, we basically said like there's certain things we're not comfortable doing, or like, you know, we don't really want to change up our whole thing, and they got it. You know, they were like, we like you guys as you are, and you know, there's not going to be any sort of like internal pressure for you guys to sell more records or whatever, you know. So and like we got that in writing, you know, like we basically, like the deal we signed was very, very artist and like gave us complete creative control over everything. So yeah, so that being the case, you know, like that hasn't changed. We've been at the same label ever since. So, you know, all we do is make records and then go tour, and then the industry kind of changes around us. But it hasn't really affected how we operate as a band.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are getting close to the end of this interview. Again, I want to thank you, Barry Johnson, lead singer of Joyce Manor, for coming on The Point with us today. Our final question that we like to ask all touring artists as we get them on here: what advice would you give to young artists who are trying to break through their scene?
Just do it for the right reasons. You know, try to write songs that you really think are good. Don't worry about like what other people, you know, might want to hear. Or, you know, you can't write for what you think people want. Just write something that you think is good, and then listen to what people are of the material that you write. Pay attention to what people respond to. So if you show someone a song you wrote and you kind of get like a lukewarm reaction, keep writing. And once you write something that somebody gives you this look like, hey, that's actually really good, try to figure out what it is about that people are connecting with, you know? And record yourself a lot. Try to like record and listen back to how you actually sound. and staying in tune and playing time and have fun.
All of that is very powerful. Thank you so much, Barry, for taking this time out of your very busy day. We all thank you here at 88.7. And for those, catch Joyce Manor next month on Thursday, April 30th at Woolies in downtown Des Moines. Visit First Fleet Concerts to get tickets, as it will be an amazing concert. But Barry, thank you so much for having us, and have a great rest of your day.
Hey, anytime. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, and coming up next is Joyce Manor with All My Friends Are So Depressed. And more music you're not hearing anywhere else but 88.7 KWDM, The Point.